All right. What is going on, Texan fans, Houston sports fans everywhere? As you see, I am going to be the only one hosting this latest Bleacher Report episode. Ruben has something personal that he's dealing with. Appreciate him for, letting me know. I hope everything's okay with him, and make sure y'all let him know in the comment section that he's doing all right. So, without further ado, you only got me for about 30 minutes to talk some Houston Texans football. And today, ladies and gentlemen, the NFL Combine is going to get underway tomorrow. And today, we had Nick Casario and D'Amico Ryans both speak at the podium, both give some takes and their insights on a range of questions, whether it's the Philadelphia Eagles and the tush push, whether it's Howie Roseman and how he built the Philadelphia Eagles. We have some positions that they've mentioned about being important for the Houston Texans to take a look into. We got a whole bunch of content to discuss and lots of fun, and we're going to get into it right now because D'Amico and Nick seem to be on the same page in terms of the plans for the Houston Texans. Because immediately I go, how do we get to the next step? That's always a question for every Texan fan. We just haven't been able to get to that next step. D'Amico Ryans is wanting an answer for that this offseason. He wants an answer to that question. Hell, that was a quote coming from D'Amico Ryans himself, talking about how do we get to that next step? How do we take that next step as a franchise and as an organization? And again, we have been asking this for quite some time. The Houston Texans, as we all know, continue to fall short of expectations today. No, this year we fell short of the expectations entering this season, and it just didn't quite work out. It is what it is. But ultimately, it gets tiresome, especially as a fan, and not only as a fan, but as somebody that is in the organization like D'Amico Ryans, who has been a former player. He was knocking on the door in the playoffs that one year. Didn't happen. A year where you thought the Houston Texans were Super Bowl hopefuls. This year there was a lot of Super Bowl hype around this team. There was a lot of dark horse picks for this Houston Texans team. So I think what's very great is D'Amico acknowledging that, trying to figure out what is that next step for the Houston Texans. D'Amico had also mentioned, and this was yesterday, he mentioned positions that need to be taken a look at. And if you missed me and Ruben's live stream last week, we talked about the position of needs that the Houston Texans should be looking for with the upcoming draft and even free agency. And the main three that we fell on was defensive tackle, wide receiver, and offensive line. And how coincidentally, D'Amico Ryans talked about three positions specifically. He talked about the offensive line, the wide receivers, and the defensive tackle position. Now, what it really sounded like is that D'Amico Ryan seems very. There was a lot of input when it came to the defensive tackle position. Talked about the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit. Talked about, trying to add talent to both sides of the line of scrimmage, specifically when it came to defensive tackles. Talking about trying to build the interior and getting guys that obviously fit the mindset the Houston Texans are looking for. As we all know, the swarm mentality is raving throughout the Houston Texans. Offensive line, he talked specifically about grabbing a pass protector, somebody that is very good in pass protection. Now, the Houston Texans, as we all know, have a gaping hole at the offensive line, specifically the interior. And yes, my voice raises a little higher when I talk about the offensive line because the offensive line was the death of the Houston Texans 2024 offense. And we fell on its nails in the divisional round in the Chiefs late in the middle of the fourth quarter. The Texans fell again with that offensive line being the sword. And it continues to be that way. It continues to feel like the Texans cannot find a solution for offensive line. But I will say this, it is good to know what the problems are. Like, we as fans, this isn't rocket science. We all knew that the three biggest issues for this Texans team was defensive tackle, offensive line, and wide receiver. Again, it isn't rocket science. We all understand that. The what makes you go, "Oh, okay. There we go," is that your team can acknowledge those problems and they know immediately what they need to fix, what they need to attack, what they need to pay attention to going into this draft, combine, free agency, whatever, trade block. The Houston Texans have many avenues to improve this team. It doesn't just have to be the NFL combine and the scouting and the draft. It could also be free agency, and it could also be the trade block. There are a few guys out there, they are available on the trade block that this Houston Texans team could be taking a look at. We had some news today about Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers, and my goodness, I would be extremely interested in a Texans deal for Brandon Ayuk because that guy right there, who, yes, was having a dispute with his contract just what felt like a year ago almost, but it is what it is. The 49ers are in a little bit of a cap hell. They got to get rid of some money. Brandon Ayuk was already given an extension, and hmm, I'm not I'm not against trading for a Brandon Ayuk. Look, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the wide receiver position, one of the positions that D'Amico mentioned by name as something the Texans need to improve on, it's just Nico Collins. And then the ragtag of wide receivers that follow suit. We all got to expect that Tank Dell is not going to be healthy for this upcoming year. Obviously, with the devastating injury late in December, extremely difficult for him to have a turnaround as quick as he could. Even in a year, you're looking at somebody that could come back in January, but that's just a year. You're not even taking into effect rehab and everything else that's going to go into this account. So I would expect him to miss the entire 2026 season. And the Houston Texans are having to move forward, and their plans of moving forward could enter Brandon Ayuk. That would be a very interesting idea. Obviously, we know that Deebo Samuel is somebody that the 49ers could be looking to cut, and they could be looking to trade Brandon Ayuk. Now, who knows? But in terms of the trade capital, the value for Brandon Ayuk, I'm willing to give up a third round pick for Brandon Ayuk. I am. I'm sold. Like, give me somebody that is an all pro. Yes, he got hurt, but this guy was an all pro wide receiver, and you can pair him up with Nico Collins, a guy that is already going to be familiar with some of the verbiage when it comes to this offensive scheme of Nick Caley's. I know that it's not the Shanahan scheme, but it is a modified version of that scheme, and the base and the bolts and nuts of the scheme is the Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan kind of scheme. Brandon Ayuk would fit that perfectly. I would not mind it. And he's young. He's like 27 years old still. Him and Nico Collins is a 1-2 duo. When you look at the rest of the NFL, wide receiver duos are everywhere amongst the NFL. If you don't have a duo, then you either have a good group of wide receivers that are getting the job done or just that damn good elite quarterback. The Houston Texans could have both. Yes, I'll throw CJ Stroud as an elite quarterback because I think he does follow this year with a resounding good bounce back 25-26 year. And I expect that from CJ Stroud. But you compare him with Nico, Brandon Ayuk, Joe Mixon, reconstruct this offensive line, you got yourself something scary that could be brewing here in Houston. There's many other guys that you got in there that you could be looking at the cut candidates as well, whether it's Cooper Kupp who could be getting cut, Debo Samuel, like I mentioned already, again, somebody already familiar with the scheme. Two guys that are familiar with this scheme, especially Cooper Kupp. My only issue with Kupp is the injury history. I am afraid that you will only have Nico Collins again for the playoffs, and I just don't want that. I'm tired of going into the playoffs. Everyone's all right and pretty healthy, except your damn wide receiver group. I'm tired of seeing Nico Collins in the ragtag group of wide receivers that can't do nothing but a few plays here and there. And it's no more than 5 plays, maybe 3 plays. You get 1 or 2 plays from Hutch and Mechie. I don't expect anything else from them. I think they are done. I think they are career wide receiver 4s and 5s for the rest of their career. Maybe one of them has a splash year in the right system and utilized more and thrown extra targets to. Who knows? But ultimately, those are a few wide receivers that I would not mind the Houston Texans to take a look at. And then, obviously you have free agency. And I think something that Nick Casario harped on and was asked about at the NFL Combine was Howie Roseman's style of GMing with the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Casario mentioned one thing specifically, and I thought it was absolutely something that the Texans should be taking a look into. I've done a few videos already talking about bargain bin wide receivers or just bargain bin shopping, thrifty shopping, being a bit frugal with the money. As we all know, the Houston Texans cap space is between $4 to $8 million. Now, yes, they can restructure, they can extend some people, they can cut people, and that would open up some money. There's ways to manufacture money and dollars to the cap space for the Houston Texans. There's ways to, as people say, manipulate the cap space. We've seen many good teams do it for many, many years. It's also kicking the can down the road, and you are going to inevitably see this can at some point. But if I see that can at some point again with a ring on my finger, then I'm extremely happy. And I'm talking about a Super Bowl ring. I would be extremely happy. The LA Rams said F the picks and decided to go all in. And they got their Super Bowl, man. And hey, you can't take that away from them. They got their Super Bowl. I would do the exact same thing if I'm the Houston Texans. You got to find a way of manipulating this cap space, opening it up, and getting some quality players that you can grab for the Houston Texans in order to continue to be one of the best teams in the AFC. No one's leaving anytime soon. The Buffalo Bills are still there. The Baltimore Ravens are still there. The Kansas City Chiefs are the kings of the AFC until proven otherwise. You never know with the Bengals and Joe Burrow. That defense, as long as it gets constructed nicely, that team is always going to be there. Like there are other teams, hell, even the Chargers. I know we whooped them, but with Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh, for their first year to turn it around to be a wild card appearance, I know it didn't end the way they did, thankfully, because the Houston Texans whooped that behind. It was fun to see what they did, and that's only year one. Imagine what else they can do. There's plenty of other teams. Hell, you never know what's going to happen with the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. Still a dark horse team that was a very random fall from grace 2 years ago where they were atop of the division and beat us at home. So the Houston Texans, they got their work cut out for them in the AFC, very tough AFC. And Nick Casario, and this is where I'm getting to, they asked him about being aggressive still this year because there was some aggressiveness from the Houston Texans. Not some. There was free agent aggressiveness last year from this Houston Texans team. They were fully in on almost getting Saquon Barkley. They ended up still getting a Joe Mixon. They traded for a Stephon Diggs. They were in the midst of big-time free agents that were trying to come here. They still ended up with a Daniel Hunter, the Nico Autry. Like, what they did last year was basically telling the whole NFL, like, hey, we're going into this thing 2 feet forward, and we are going to show the rest of y'all that we can not only improve this team, but try to be Super Bowl contenders. And that's exactly what you want every single year. And maybe the aggressiveness, does it go down? Does it stay the same? That's so somebody asked Nick Casario, and Nick Casario, basic answer. The mindset is the same. Casario said today, when asked they still be aggressive despite not having much money, his answer was, "We're trying to find good football players." I'm sold. I'm sold, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I need to hear. The Houston Texans are still going to be aggressive. The Houston Texans are still going to try to improve this team in any which way possible. Now, yeah, that's a Captain Obvious kind of statement. But as Texans fans, not so much. We're pretty accustomed to, oh, okay, we're in the driver's seat. All right, I could lay back a little bit. We can, as Texans fans, we're used to the organization getting comfortable. Just, oh, okay, well, we know we're going to win the division. We were used to that. With Bill O'Brien, it was a comfortable seat. Oh, you're going to win the division. You're going to beat a team you probably shouldn't. You're going to lose to many teams you probably shouldn't. But at the end of the day, you'll be in the playoffs, you'll win the division, and that's it. And so for Nick Casario to come out and basically imply that the Texans are going to continue to be aggressive is something that should just spark Texans fans inside and go, man, hell yeah, that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear from my GM and head coach. I want to know that the Texans are still going to be aggressive. I want to know what can they improve in the three positions they spoke of. Again, wide receiver, DT, offensive line. I already mentioned a boatload of wide receivers. Offensive lineman, you got Kevin Zeitler available. Today, we just heard that the LA Rams could be moving on from Jonah Jackson, who was injured this previous year, was a Pro Bowler with the Detroit Lions. Who knows? Okay? Nothing out of the realm of possibility right there. Jonah Jackson, Jonah Jackson could be a very good addition to this Texans team. Someone that could be cut potentially. Not a bad idea. Not a bad one at all. Shaq Mason is pretty horrible, and anything's an improvement to him. Hell, a traffic cone's an improvement to him. Jonah Jackson's a hell of an improvement to him as long as he stays healthy. That's not a bad idea at all for this Texans team. Brandon Scherf is a free agent. No more Zach Martin. He ended up retiring Hall of Fame career. There's some people out there in free agency the Texans could take a look at. And then when I look at DT, I'm thinking about Sebastian Joseph Day is one somebody I continue to take a look at. Someone that you can potentially grab, really good run stuffer, and then re-signing guys like Foley Fatukasi, maybe Mario Edwards. Them two specifically are at the top of the list when it comes to signing free agents because they were very underrated in their jobs here in Houston. I wouldn't be upset if they re-signed them guys. I'm also more looking to improve the defensive tackle position in the draft. That's something I would very much be pleased by. But one thing that I loved from Nick Casario was him using an example when he was talking about the Eagles and Howie Roseman and how they constructed their roster. He used an example from the Eagles acquiring linebacker Zach Bond in free agency last offseason on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. And obviously, that is now viewed as a bargain, big time bargain deal. Zach Bond immediately turned into a superstar playing inside linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles. Diving interception. My goodness, he was amazing. Remember what I said earlier about being thrifty, bargain bin shopping, being frugal with the money? That's something that the Eagles did with Zach Bond, and they took a chance with it. It was like, all right, we'll see what he got. We're going to try him at this position, and let's see what happens. There's a guy that not so much frugal, but there's a guy that you could take a risk in Mekhi Becton, who played guard for the same Philadelphia Eagles team and played guard extremely well. I mean, my goodness, Mekhi Becton is a massive human being, 6'7", 360, former tackle for the New York Jets, moved to guard after Tyler Steen got hurt, entered into the starting lineup, And for the rest of the regular season, the dude was amazing. 900 snaps, only 5 sacks allowed, and had, I believe, like 5 penalties. But in the playoffs, he had like 250 snaps, only 1 sack allowed, only 1 penalty. I mean, Mekhi Becton looked very, very good. Now, the risk here is, can you replicate that season again? Or was it a fluke year? Was it just his success with the rest of the offensive line that we know that Eagles O line is legitimate? Okay. Maybe it was the success of everyone else and he just didn't seem to be the main guy like the Jets, where he was the first round pick and supposed to change the entire offensive line. Who knows? What I do know is there's a risk and reward factor there, and I think at his market value could be around $10 million. The Houston Texans wouldn't. It's not a bad idea, and considering he's young, and who knows? I mean, with this Texans' new offensive scheme of Nick Caley, they seem to be moving more north south in terms of the running style instead of east west. So could be an interesting idea. Yet again, another name this Houston Texans team could be looking into. So, I mean, Nick Caserio, using him as an example, made me excited because there's a plenty amount of wide receivers that are bargain bin guys, and hell, some of them that are former Nick Caley people, and one of them being Demarcus Robinson. I would not mind a veteran wide receiver that can still get the job done at 31 years old. Had his best 2 years of his career with Nick Caley. Especially this previous year, we had 7 touchdowns. He had a 16.3 yards per reception rate. That's the highest in his career. And yes, he played with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. He had 11 touchdowns, in the past 2 years with working with Nick Caley and Sean McVay, obviously. But 11 touchdowns the past 2 years. He had 14 total touchdowns in his career with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I would not mind trying to grab some of that success here in Houston. And if Demarcus Robinson's smart, I don't think he wouldn't mind trying to follow Nick Caley and go, man, I just had the best season of my career. Maybe I could do it again here in Houston with Nick Caley, who don't have an obvious wide receiver too right now. Again, there's so many ways you can cut this. But D'Amico Ryan's talking about the positions to improve. Nick Caserio answering the questions at the podium. It makes Texans fans go, very interesting. And it also makes me feel like, okay, the Texans know exactly what the problem is. They're going to attack the problem, and they're going to try to improve as best way as possible with this team moving forward, because they all know CJ Stroud and the rookie deal contract of a quarterback, it goes up like that, guys. It's already going to be year 3. Think about that. Already year 3 for CJ Stroud. It just felt like yesterday we drafted him and Will Anderson, and we were going bonkers after a crazy Tampa Bay Buccaneers game where CJ had 4 or 5 touchdowns in the game and the most passing yards for a rookie or whatever. Like, he was setting records his rookie year. So it's crazy to think we are year 3 now. The Houston Texans got to think about what they're going to do moving forward. Nick Caserio says the mindset stays the same. We're trying to find good football players. Talked about D'Amico Ryan saying that I'll go to war with this guy. Seems pretty obvious. I don't know why it's asked every year. I don't know why people continue to try to find a way to divide our head coach and GM. I don't know, Texans fans. It just seems like every year there's always a topic where someone is trying to divide the head coach and GM here, D'Amico and Nick Caserio. I don't know why. They seem like they get along just fine. Hell, D'Amico Ryans was talking about no, Nick Caserio, was talking about when I'm talking, he's thinking. When he's talking, I'm thinking. Like, he said there's synergy between them. I'll go to war with that guy. Like, there is definitely a connection between both of them guys. And so far, during D'Amico's tenure, Nick Caserio, I mean, he's been, for the most part, really solid GM. Yeah, there's some questionable moves here and there, obviously. But for the most part, I would tend to lean that Nick Caserio is the right guy. The right guy for Houston. I don't know what happened to my stream right there. It went away. But yeah, the Houston Texans, Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans, talking about the future, talking about the plans for the Houston Texans at the NFL Combine. Certainly good, certainly fun to talk about, to conversate. We know that the Houston Texans, when it comes to bargain deals, there's no one better, right? Nick Caserio, the 1-2 year wide receiver plans, the 1-2 year deals that he's done for any free agent. Hell, we saw it with Noah Brown. There's too many. There's too many because he did it way before during the David Coley year. That was a ridiculous year. But D'Amico talking about, you want to add as many great players to our team as possible, and that's what it will allow us to be a really good team. You got to have some dudes. Love it. You got to have some dudes if you want to improve and you want to get better as a team. If you want to reach that ultimate goal of a Super Bowl, you got to continue to improve this team. This team is far from done, far from finished. It is not perfect in any which way possible. Knowing their mistakes, knowing the problems, I think gives them a leg up going into the NFL Combine. They know exactly. There's no mystery as to what the problems were in Houston this previous year. CJ Stroud has to improve, which he will. Nick Caley checks off a box for the Texans' problems, hopefully. But moving forward, NFL Combine, offensive line, wide receiver, DT. Texans met with Alfred Collins from Texas, former Texas Longhorn. Enunciation is key. Texas Longhorns DT Alfred Collins met with the Houston Texans. Big old dude, 6'5", 320. You talk about somebody that can stuff the run. Alfred Collins does exactly that. Pretty athletic for his height and weight displacement and ratio there. Not quite sure how good he is against the pass, but I know Foley Fatukasi as a free agent would be a very interesting idea to have Alfred Collins maybe replace a Foley Fatukasi. But we'll see where he goes and where he falls in the draft. But ultimately the Texans team, so far, that's what I've seen in terms of who they've met with. I don't know if anyone else has met with the Texans or at least tweeted out that they met with the Texans, which I am just going to go ahead and search right now. But ultimately, this Texans team, CJ Stroud, everyone. See, there we go. You had Baron Sorrell as well, met with the Texans. Alfred Collins, as I've mentioned already. Like, this Texans team needs a defensive tackle in the worst way possible. I'm sick and tired of just having guys, and I understand these guys, they did all right. They're not bad, but I want something else. Like, I want legitimate dudes. I want guys that can move the opposing offensive lines. I want guys that can transform this defensive line into a different stratosphere. And I think ultimately maybe the Texans' plan and D'Amico Ryans and his heavy input on the defensive tackle position at the podium was pretty enlightening to go, maybe they're looking at DT in round one. Maybe they're looking at a Walter Nolan. Maybe they're looking at someone like him, Derek Harmon as well, Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Woo! The Texans have a boatload of options for defensive tackle, and I think that's ultimately, I love this. I've been pounding on the table for a few years now for a defensive tackle for the Houston Texans. I've wanted many DTs that the Texans did not get. I wanted Jerzon Newton last year. I wanted Jordan Davis from Georgia when we got Kenyon Green. I wanted Jordan Davis. I really did. This Texans team can get so much better defensively if they had a disruptive defensive tackle and, again, could really elevate this defense into another level. Remember, Luke Kuechly talked about a defense that is similar to the Philadelphia Eagles, mentioned the Houston Texans by name. Damn good pretty solid secondary, solid linebackers, good D-line. Overall, the defense is pretty straight. You get you a blue chip prospect at DT, now you're talking about moving forward into a very good direction for D'Amico Ryans and company. And obviously, D'Amico's a defensive guy. So he gonna talk and boast his defensive tackle as much as he can and maybe get Nick to sway on that side. But what say y'all guys? Make sure y'all go down in the comment section. Y'all let us know, what do you think the plan is for the Houston Texans moving forward? And that's pretty much it. That's all we got today for Bleacher Report. If y'all like the stream, make sure to go ahead and like it down below. Leave a comment. Tell us how we can do better. What else do y'all want us to talk about? Let us know. What's a topic y'all want us to talk about? Ruben will be back for Friday's stream. Again, Friday, 6 p.m. Never miss it. Always here. Texans talk daily here on Bleacher Report. My name is Harley Dugan. If you like me, make sure you go ahead and check out my YouTube channel, TheLead Houston, where I talk all Houston sports all the time, all Houston all the time. Astros, Rockets, Texans, I do it all. So TheLead _ HOU if you are interested. You have a very blessed day, man. Y'all have a good one.